I had another video planned for today. This is episode 13 of the No Shave November video challenge, but I really wanted to address something that's really important to me and seems to be important to a lot of you. I know a lot of you are stuck. I was stuck. I get stuck from time to time in this healing journey of mine. And I got a question from Sean Doodles over on Instagram, and he asked me, what things keep you going when your condition just lays you out and holds you down and beats the tar out of you? And what do you think of to keep from giving up? What makes you fight? I've seen this, I've experienced this, and the underlying reason I continue to fight, and I'm now fighting for other people, is because I know what the alternative is. The suicide rates for people with chronic illness, whether mental illness or chronic pain illnesses, is astronomically high as compared to other groups of people. And it's not, to me, it's not an issue of giving up. It's people are giving in because the amount of pain that they're feeling is so intense that they don't see an alternative. A lot of people think that suicide is about giving up, and I don't see it that way. I see it as more or less giving in, and there's a distinction between the two. The pain just becomes so unbearable, and there's, whether it's mental anguish or physical pain, and they've seen multiple people, they've tried doing different things to kind of alleviate that, and they're not getting anywhere, or they feel like they're not making any progress. So the short answer is that I know what the alternative. That's what keeps me going. I've struggled myself with suicidal ideations and attempts in the past, and I know that for me that's not the answer, and for you guys it's not the answer. So if you're at a crisis point with suicidal ideation or your mental health, I want you to contact 911, your medical provider, your therapist, whoever is helping you. And if you aren't involved in any kind of system, reach out to somebody who's going to listen, who will take you seriously, or call 911. If you're not at a crisis point, but you're still feeling pretty shitty, it's just how it is, I have a few steps that'll kind of help pull you away from the metaphorical ledge. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. I can expand, but I'm going to cover them briefly. So, number one, I used to have these thoughts cyclically, basically aligning with my hormones, for lack of better terminology. And it was always like 3 days before. And sometimes I would catch it and I would realize that that's what was happening. And sometimes it would be like day 2, day 3, and I go check my calendar and I go, okay. Now, that was helpful for me because I was able to kind of switch to rational thinking, which is what I'm going to talk about in a minute. But the very first thing that I do is I let the emotions, the feelings, like flow. Because if you try to stop them right in the middle when they're super intense, that's going to lead to feelings of failure when you can't stop them, feelings of guilt if you can't stop them, all of these other things that you don't need to pile on top of the fact that you're already struggling at this point. I've done it both times, and then what happens is you feel bad because you feel bad because you feel bad, and it's just a horrible cycle, and it's really, really hard to kind of pull back once you get into that. So I want you to just let the feelings like kind of flow through you, like feel them, get it out, cry, sit by yourself, whatever kind of helps you. Just allow yourself to feel it, because the feelings and the emotions, they're real. Sometimes they're based on things that maybe aren't necessarily real or logical, or maybe you're overthinking something. Number 2 is once I realized that this is kind of on that downward slide, after I let myself kind of feel what's going on, I make myself switch from emotional thinking to rational thinking. So it's really taking stock in, this is how I feel about what's happening. what are the facts about what is actually happening. So if you had a really bad day at work, and sometimes when you have anxiety, depression, and other mental health disorders, that bad day that maybe was only really 10 minutes has this snowball effect. And it can turn 10 minutes into a bad week because that's what happens. Your mind kind of runs away with it. Worst case scenario thinking works like that. So what I do is I say, when I'm able to, is I say, okay, hey, was it really a bad week? Was it really a bad day? Was it really a bad 10 minutes? Was it really only one bad interaction that kind of started this snowball? And if I can pinpoint that and kind of root it in logic and say, okay, my feelings are based on what so-and-so said or what happened. My feelings are valid, but I want to move on from that. So it really, it's a hard switch to make sometimes, because sometimes we get lost in that snowball. But if you're able to catch yourself and switch your thinking to, these are the facts. Another thing that's really helpful is the five senses concept, which is basically when you catch yourself kind of sliding, it's a grounding exercise where you want to make a list, basically a mental list of 5 things. So one thing you can see, one thing you can touch, one you can hear, one you can smell, and one you can taste, like right here in the moment. And it's a grounding exercise, and it stops that thought process that you're having. One that I use now, and I'm just thinking this, I use it pretty frequently just with any kind of negative thinking, is this cancel concept that David Meltzer, I learned from him in his book. And when that negative thought process starts, reminding myself to say either cancel, either out loud or in my head, and it immediately interrupts that negative thought process. You may have to say cancel 16 times in a row. It may happen multiple times an hour. You may forget, but it's a really good tool that I have in my toolbox to stop negative thinking patterns. So the other thing I want you to remember so far as like logical thinking is your success rate for getting through days at this point, watching this video, is 100%. Whether they were super horrible or really great, you still managed to get through, and you're here watching this video right now. So give yourself credit. That should help you have a little bit of a confidence boost, which can also help the thinking, stop the thinking process. So those are the 3 things that I can think of off the top of my head that I use on a pretty regular basis if I need them. I've had depressive episodes as recently as a month ago, and it was, like I said, it was letting myself feel it, kind of releasing that, using logical thinking. Worst case scenario for me, if I can't really pull myself out of that, is I think about my kids and my family. And not in a guilty way, because that's not going to help you, but it's more or less like, how are they going to feel if I am not able to kind of get on an even keel, or if I were to do something really drastic, like suicide attempt. That for me is the very last anchor that I would use to kind of stop myself from a suicidal down spiral. So if you guys have any questions for me, I know this topic is a little bit heavier than we normally cover, but it is the main goal of my Unbreakable campaign is suicide prevention. And I really wanted to address this just because of the importance I feel like it has. So yeah, if you have any questions for me, you can either drop them in the comments. If you don't feel comfortable dropping them in the comments, feel free to DM me, Posh Notions across social. If you don't want your question, broadcast, it'll be anonymous. I'm not going to share your personal information with anybody. And I hope you got some value out of this. And if somebody you know is struggling with depression or suicidal ideations, there are multiple hotlines. There's National Suicide Prevention Hotline and suicide awareness hotlines. If you feel that they're, in danger, of course, get them help immediately. And if you yourself are really struggling, like I said in the beginning of the video, feel free to reach out to me. There's judgment-free zone, and I can help direct you to service if necessary, or if you just need somebody to vent to, I'm here for that too. So I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your day, and I hope that these tips can help you a little bit. For the purposes of this video, I'm going to talk about the mental chronic illness, and then in another video I'm going to address the physical aspect of that, because although they're tied together, the approach that I use for each of them is different, and kind of pulling myself back away from that ledge